July 14, 1943. The early morning haze clung to the rolling fields outside Berlin, mixing with the acrid scent of fuel and oil as the sun struggled to pierce the thick clouds. Inside the Luftwaffe testing facility, the air was heavy with anticipation. The captured aircraft sat gleaming under the hangar lights, its polished aluminum skin reflecting the dim morning glow. A group of German pilots, some with years of combat experience over the Eastern Front and North Africa, approached the P-47 Thunderbolt with cautious curiosity. They had heard whispers of its legendary durability, yet no one could have predicted what they were about to witness. The P-47 had not been a common sight in Europe until American bombers and fighters began pounding strategic targets across occupied territories. Known as the Jug to American pilots, it was a robust, heavily armed fighter designed for high-altitude escort missions and ground attack. Its massive Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine, capable of producing nearly 2,000 horsepower, gave the plane an intimidating presence in the sky. Yet, on the ground, its design seemed almost ordinary until one looked closer. The wings alone, wide and muscular, suggested a structural strength that defied conventional engineering of the era. For German engineers and pilots accustomed to sleek, lightly built Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs, this was a mystery. How could a plane survive dives exceeding 500 miles per hour without shattering? Without the wings tearing away from the fuselage in a catastrophic failure, the pilots exchanged glances, a mixture of disbelief and professional curiosity. In their experience, aircraft stress limits were well known. Yet here, in their own hands, lay an aircraft that seemingly laughed at physics. The story of the P-47 began not in Germany, but across the Atlantic. In the workshops and airfields of Republic Aviation in Farmingdale, New York, designed in response to the U.S. Army Air Corps' demand for a high-altitude fighter capable of both long-range escort and heavy firepower, the Thunderbolt was a marvel of American engineering. Its airframe was strengthened with a robust internal frame, and the wings were designed with thick spars to absorb extreme forces. Engineers conducted meticulous wind tunnel tests, simulated dives, and stress evaluations long before the plane ever touched European soil. Meanwhile, the Luftwaffe was fighting for survival. By mid-1943, the Allied bombing campaign was intensifying, and German pilots were scrambling to intercept formations of B-17 flying fortresses escorted by P-47s. Reports filtered back from frontline pilots. Jug pilots dive fearlessly, wings hold, engines roar, and the plane pulls out without faltering. German aces were astonished by the audacity of these attacks and the apparent invulnerability of the aircraft. Each encounter left a lingering question: how was this possible? Inside the hangar, the captured P-47 bore the scars of combat small bullet holes. Along the fuselage, a dented wingtip, but nothing that suggested structural weakness. The Luftwaffe team meticulously inspected every component. Fingers traced the thick metal, marveling at the sheer solidity of the wing spars and the resilient aluminum skin. Each screw and rivet seemed to have been designed not just for function, but for endurance under extreme stress. One pilot ran a hand along the ailerons, half expecting the entire assembly to flex or crack. It did not. The pilots could hear the faint hum of other aircraft outside, engines warming for morning sorties, but inside this hangar time seemed to stretch. Here they were not flying, here they were learning, studying, and perhaps unconsciously fearing. They whispered among themselves, speculating on the strength of the airframe, on the daring tactics American pilots employed in their P-47 seconds. Every detail mattered. What kind of maneuvers could a pilot perform without risking a catastrophic wing failure? Could the plane outdive a Messerschmitt or a Focke-Wulf? And, most haunting of all, what did it mean for the Luftwaffe's chances against such a durable opponent? Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the distant sound of Allied bombers droning high above occupied Europe. It was a reminder that while theory and inspection were valuable, the ultimate test would always be in the sky. The pilots moved from wing to fuselage, from tail to cockpit, absorbing every detail. They noted the control surface's responsiveness, the cockpit layout designed for ergonomic efficiency under combat stress, and the visibility from the pilot's seat a stark contrast to their own aircraft, which often left blind spots in crucial engagements. Historical records confirm that these evaluations were meticulous. Luftwaffe engineers took measurements, sketched diagrams, and tested control responses under simulated load conditions. Every decision in German aircraft design was influenced by observed weaknesses in enemy planes. But the P-47 presented an entirely new problem. It had no glaring weaknesses. Where German fighters were often fragile under extreme dive stress, the Thunderbolt seemed invulnerable. The question was no longer how strong is it, but how do we counter it? As the day progressed, a small team prepared to test the aircraft in controlled dives. Engines roared to life, echoing off hangar walls, vibrations resonating through the concrete floor. The smell of hot oil and exhaust filled the air. The pilots' hearts raced not from fear of flying, but from the anticipation of witnessing something extraordinary. Could the wings really endure speeds of 500 miles per hour? Could a machine survive the very limits of human engineering? And if it could, what did that mean for the skies over Europe? This captured P-47 represented more than metal and machinery. It was a symbol of a growing technological gap, a tangible measure of Allied innovation. Each rivet and joint told a story of meticulous design, rigorous testing, and engineering foresight. Meanwhile, German pilots seasoned in combat and skilled in the brutal calculus of aerial warfare faced a moment of humbling discovery. In their hands, the Thunderbolt was not just a plane, it was a revelation. Later accounts from German memoirs described the mixture of awe and anxiety that filled these early tests. One pilot recalled standing at the wingtip, feeling the metal shiver under minimal force, yet knowing it could withstand forces far beyond human imagination. Another noted the almost theatrical tension as the first controlled dives were executed, engines screaming, wind tearing at the fuselage, wings flexing imperceptibly yet holding firm. There was disbelief, yes, but also a grudging respect for an aircraft that had been designed to survive what many thought impossible. The implications were immediate and far-reaching. If the P-47 could survive dives that pushed it to structural limits, Allied pilots had an unparalleled advantage in both air-to-air combat and ground attack missions. German pilots, now intimately familiar with its design, had to rethink engagement strategies. They could anticipate firepower, predict flight performance, but one critical variable remained: could they exploit a weakness that simply did not exist? As the sun set over the Berlin airfield, shadows stretching long across the tarmac, the captured P-47 rested silently under the hangar lights. Its aluminum skin glinted faintly, hiding the secrets of its legendary wings. For the German pilots who had examined it, a quiet tension lingered, a mixture of fascination, apprehension, and respect. They had touched a machine that defied expectations, challenged preconceptions, and forced a reassessment of aerial warfare. In the coming months, these observations would inform tactical manuals, influence combat strategies, and serve as a sobering reminder: in the skies above Europe, innovation was as lethal as any bullet, and the P-47 Thunderbolt was a formidable opponent. The story of its wings, surviving 500-mile-per-hour dives, would become a legend, not just for American pilots, but for every pilot who dared to face it. October 3, 1943. A cold wind swept across the testing grounds near Rechlin, Germany, rattling loose metal sheets and carrying the faint, acrid scent of engine exhaust. The captured P-47, freshly repaired and meticulously inspected, sat on the tarmac, its massive wings casting long shadows under the grey sky. The Luftwaffe pilots gathered in small clusters, their breath visible in the chilly morning air, fingers nervously brushing the worn leather of their flight gloves. Today, theory would meet reality, and the answers they sought about the Thunderbolt's legendary wings were about to be revealed. The pilots climbed into the cockpit one by one, their movements precise, almost ritualistic, the canopy closed with a satisfying clunk, sealing them in an environment designed for both protection and intimidation. The engine roared to life, a low, vibrating growl that reverberated through the fuselage, echoing against the hangar walls like a promise of power. Every pilot felt a twinge of both excitement and dread. How would the plane respond to German test maneuvers? Could it truly withstand the stresses they planned to impose? As the P-47 taxied onto the runway, the first dive test was plotted carefully. The goal: push the aircraft to the upper limits of its structural tolerance without compromising safety. A Luftwaffe engineer monitored every gauge, every readout, eyes flicking rapidly between altimeter, airspeed, and manifold pressure. Outside, the wind whispered through the surrounding trees, almost as if nature itself was holding its breath. The first climb was deliberate, the massive radial engine pushing the aircraft higher and higher. Clouds loomed ahead, heavy and grey, the light filtering through them in muted streaks. From the ground, the plane appeared almost stationary, but inside the cockpit, The pilots felt the sheer weight of altitude and air pressure pressing against their bodies. Every vibration, every subtle shudder of the airframe was noted. And then came the dive. The P-47 plummeted toward the earth, a controlled descent aimed at testing the limits of its wings. Instruments rattled. Airspeed climbed relentlessly. The sound of rushing wind filled the cockpit, a roar so intense that even shouted commands were swallowed. The pilot's hands gripped the control column, knuckles white, eyes fixed on the altimeter. Could the wings survive the strain? Could the fuselage hold? Every second felt like a test of nerve as much as a test of engineering. Reports from German test pilots describe an almost surreal experience. As airspeed climbed past 400 miles per hour, the wings flexed visibly yet remained unbroken. Control surfaces responded with remarkable precision, a testament to the engineering foresight of American designers. At 500 miles per hour, the upper limit of what they dared attempt, the P-47 held together flawlessly. The wings bent imperceptibly, absorbing aerodynamic forces that would have shredded many contemporary fighters. Pilots were struck dumb, a mixture of awe and professional humility settling over them. How is this possible? One experienced ace reportedly muttered, gripping the stick as the plane leveled out from the dive. Others exchanged tense glances, silent acknowledgement of the technological leap they were witnessing. In those moments, it wasn't just an aircraft, it was a challenge, a statement written in metal and rivets that redefined what was possible in aviation. The test continued, each dive incrementally more daring. The engineers recorded data meticulously, wing deflection measurements, stress points along the spars, control responsiveness at high speeds. Pilots noted the plane's stability under extreme G-forces, the surprisingly forgiving nature of its handling, and the reassurance of a robust frame that seemed almost indestructible. Every pass brought more questions, more disbelief. Could a dogfight with a P-47 ever end favorably for a Messerschmitt or Focke-Wulf pilot? How could German tactics adapt to an aircraft that absorbed punishment with almost mechanical resilience? Between dives, the pilots descended to the tarmac, faces pale but eyes bright with adrenaline. They spoke in hushed tones, describing the sounds, the vibrations, and the eerie calm of the aircraft even at maximum stress. It's like flying a fortress, one pilot said, and in that single sentence, the essence of the Thunderbolt was captured. It was not just fast, not just powerful, it was fundamentally unyielding. Meanwhile, engineers focused on the finer details. The wing spars, crafted from high-strength aluminum alloys, had been reinforced with innovative internal bracing. The control surfaces were carefully balanced to prevent flutter at extreme speeds. Every rivet, every seam, had been designed to distribute forces evenly across the structure. It was a level of precision and foresight rarely seen in wartime aircraft, and the German team could not help but feel both admiration and envy. Archival diagrams, still preserved in Luftwaffe testing records, show detailed measurements of wing deflection at various speeds, alongside annotations by engineers noting the plane's surprising resilience. One such note, scrawled hastily during a particularly tense test, simply reads, "Unglaublich unbelievable." It was a succinct admission. The Americans had created an aircraft that challenged everything the Luftwaffe had come to expect from combat aviation. The human element of these tests cannot be overstated. Test pilots were not only evaluating metal and design, they were confronting fear, risk, and professional pride. Every dive carried the possibility of structural failure, every maneuver, a reminder of the lethal stakes of the skies above Europe. Their hearts raced, adrenaline surged, yet they had to remain methodical. Observation and documentation were as critical as survival. One misjudged angle, one overlooked gauge reading, could have been catastrophic. Between runs, stories circulated among the pilots, the Thunderbolt's reputation for shrugging off enemy fire, for surviving encounters that would have destroyed other planes. They spoke of its heavy armament, the 850 caliber machine guns that could tear through enemy fighters, and its ability to absorb damage without losing maneuverability. Each anecdote reinforced a growing realization. The P-47 was not merely a fighter. It was a weapon designed to endure, to dominate, and to redefine air combat. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long, cold shadows across the tarmac, the day's final dives began. The pilots pushed the P-47 to the edge of its operational envelope, each maneuver observed with intense scrutiny. Even as fatigue set in, the aircraft performed flawlessly, its wings holding firm, its engine roaring steadily, control surfaces responsive to the slightest input. The sense of wonder was palpable, a mix of professional respect and near disbelief at what had just been witnessed. By evening, data sheets were filled, sketches annotated and notes compiled for analysis. Pilots and engineers alike were exhausted, yet no one spoke of disappointment. Instead, there was a shared, unspoken acknowledgement of the Thunderbolt's superiority in structural design. The captured P-47 had proven beyond doubt that it could survive extreme. That would have destroyed nearly any contemporary fighter. The lessons from these tests reverberated across Luftwaffe strategy rooms in the months that followed. Reports circulated to combat units, influencing engagement tactics and forcing pilots to reconsider how to counter a machine that seemed invincible in a dive. The P-47's wings had not just survived fine 100-mile-per-hour dives, they had rewritten the rules of aerial combat, challenging assumptions and demanding innovation. In response, in that cold October evening, as the last engine of the P-47 cut with a deep, echoing rumble, the pilots walked away with more than technical knowledge. They carried the weight of realization, innovation, engineering foresight, and meticulous design could change the very nature of war. The Thunderbolt was a reminder that survival in the skies required more than skill. It demanded understanding, adaptation, and respect for machines that defied conventional limits. March 12, 1944. The chill of early spring swept over the Rechlin testing grounds, carrying the scent of damp earth and the faint tang of burning fuel. Inside the hangar, the captured P-47 Thunderbolt sat under harsh light, gleaming like a metallic sentinel. Months of rigorous testing had passed, dives and stress maneuvers repeated endlessly, but the aircraft had never faltered. Today, the Luftwaffe pilots were preparing for one final series of evaluation, the ultimate test of wings that had already defied expectation. The lead test pilot, a seasoned ace with nearly a decade of combat experience, ran a hand along the fuselage. The aluminum was cold under his gloves, yet reassuringly solid. Around him, engineers adjusted instruments and checked gauges, each person acutely aware that every measurement, every observation, could provide a critical insight into a plane that seemed almost indestructible. The hum of the radial engine filled the hangar as the P-47 rolled toward the runway, and a tense silence fell over the onlookers. As the Thunderbolt climbed into the grey sky, the pilots felt the familiar tension, the simultaneous thrill and dread of testing an aircraft at the edge of its capabilities. The clouds above were heavy, the wind slicing past in violent gusts, yet the plane responded with mechanical precision. Then came the dive, steep and unforgiving, plunging toward the earth at speeds approaching 500 miles per hour. The hum of rushing air grew deafening, the fuselage vibrating with raw energy. Pilots gripped their controls, sweat-dampening leather gloves, hearts pounding in time with the engine. Below, the ground rushed closer with terrifying speed, yet the P-47 remained unwavering. Wings flexed slightly under immense aerodynamic forces, but there was no crack, no catastrophic failure. The control surfaces responded instantly to the smallest inputs. Even in this extreme scenario, the aircraft behaved predictably, almost eerily so, leaving the pilots in stunned silence. How could a machine survive forces that would have torn apart every fighter they had ever flown? The answer, they realized, lay in meticulous engineering and foresight and art and science far beyond ordinary expectation. After the dive, the aircraft leveled out smoothly, and the pilots exhaled collectively, tension melting into awe. They had witnessed something remarkable, wings designed to survive not only combat but the extreme limits of physics itself. Engineers recorded every detail with reverent precision, noting deflection angles, airspeed, and control responses, yet their notes could scarcely capture the magnitude of what they had seen. It was a moment where human experience and engineering mastery intersected, leaving everyone present with an indelible sense of respect for the machine before them. Stories from this period, preserved in Luftwaffe memoirs, describe a strange mixture of adoration and fear. One pilot later recounted standing at the wingtip, running his hand along the metal, and realizing that he had never felt anything so impossibly strong. Another recalled the silence that followed each successful dive, the unspoken acknowledgement that they were witnessing engineering that redefined aerial combat. The P-47 was more than a fighter, it was a testament to the fact that technological innovation could shift the balance of power in the skies. The broader implications became clear as reports filtered back to strategic command. Allied pilots flying P-47 seconds had unmatched advantage in high-speed dives, enabling both offensive strike and defensive maneuvers that could outmatch German fighters. Luftwaffe aces could anticipate performance and tactics, But exploiting a flaw that simply did not exist proved impossible. In many ways, the captured P-47 forced the Luftwaffe to confront a reality they had long avoided, that aerial supremacy could no longer rely solely on skill or courage. It required an understanding of machines capable of surviving the impossible. The pilots and engineers reflected on the human cost as well. Behind the cold metal and calculated maneuvers lay countless lives. Each flight a reminder of the stakes in the sky. Every dive, every test, carried the shadow of combat experience, the knowledge that failure could be fatal, that even the strongest machine could not protect a pilot from miscalculation. Yet, the P-47's wings, unyielding and resilient, offered a rare glimmer of certainty amidst the chaos of war. It was a machine designed not just to fight, but to endure. As the day wore on, the final evaluations concluded. The P-47 rolled to a stop on the tarmac, engines cooling, and the pilots disembarked with a mix of relief and lingering awe. Conversations buzzed quietly about tactics, engineering, and the lessons to be drawn from this extraordinary aircraft. Even those who had spent years in combat admitted a profound respect for its design. Its wings had survived dives that no German fighter could attempt safely, and in doing so, had rewritten the rules of engagement in the air. Archival images from the era show pilots poring over schematics, engineers taking measurements, and the P-47 glinting under hangar lights. These photographs, static and silent, capture a moment in history where human curiosity, courage, and ingenuity intersected with a machine that refused to yield. It is a testament not only to American engineering but to the enduring human quest to understand, to test, and to push boundaries beyond what was thought possible. The story of the P-47 Thunderbolt's wings is more than a tale of metal and rivets. It is a narrative of respect earned through resilience. German pilots, confronted with a machine that defied expectations, experienced a rare humility born of first-hand experience. Engineers marveled at solutions that addressed problems many of them had not even imagined. And history, watching quietly from the decades that followed, would remember the moments as emblematic of how innovation can alter the course of conflict. Reflecting on these events today, it becomes clear that the lessons extend beyond wartime. The meticulous attention to detail, the balance of risk and ingenuity, and the willingness to challenge assumptions are principles that still resonate in aviation, engineering, and beyond. The P-47 Thunderbolt, with wings that survived dives exceeding 500 miles per hour, remains an enduring symbol of what is possible when human ambition meets extraordinary design. In the quiet aftermath, one can almost hear the echoes of that October sky, the hum of engine, the rush of wind, the unspoken wonder of pilots who had seen metal defy limits. And as viewers, we are reminded of the same lesson, that behind every innovation, every historic achievement, lies courage, curiosity, and a relentless pursuit of understanding. If you've ever marveled at human ingenuity in history, imagine what it felt like to witness it in real time, in the skies of 1943 and 1944, through the eyes of those pilots. Their stories, their discoveries, and their awe continue to inspire. And perhaps, in considering the resilience of the P-47, we are challenged to ask ourselves, what limits might we push if we dare to test the impossible?